Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in this very important subject this evening that we will bringing to you. When I say we, I am speaking of the C.H.L.M.S Medi-Helpz Foundation. This is a topic of discussion that everyone should know. Does not matter, what color you are. It doesn't matter. You need to know the truth. You need to know what occurred with us. And things may have occurred even before the study that we're going to hear about tonight. It's just that so often we're not told about it when we need to be told about it. We need to make sure that, we make things right, that this country makes things right for us. And so, with great anticipation and great heartfelt thanks, I am thanking our guest for tonight. I am also, on behalf of the C.H.L.M.S Medi-Helpz board, thanking our guest for this evening for being here. Before I introduce her, what I do want to mention is this. This is being recorded. If at any point, as I've stated throughout all of our events that we've done, if they're on live, LinkedIn Live, you have access to them. Just go to my website, or I should say our website, which is www.medihelpz.com. And Medi-Helpz is MEDIHELPZ.com. And you can actually go to community events and be able to view the video. This is a video that you definitely want to view, and you want to send other people to view it as well. It'll also be on LinkedIn, although I'm not under my events, although I'm not sure how long it stays on LinkedIn, which is why I encourage you to go to my website to view this video. As you are watching this video tonight live, if you have comments and you're watching this video via Facebook, please put your comments in Facebook. We will be able to see them. Facebook now does allow us to see comments, and I believe it's going to ask you if you have permission, put your name in so that you will always be able to have permission to put comments in Facebook. If you're putting comments in LinkedIn, everyone knows that sometimes you can read the comments and sometimes you can't read the comments on LinkedIn Live. Please put your comments in there. I will make sure that Helen does see those comments that come in, so that if you have questions, you want to know how you can help, you want to know where do you sign your name at to join in this movement, to make sure that more than us knows about it, because we really need everyone to find out about the importance of this study she's going to bring to us. We need, what I would like to see is, I would like to see the story that she's going to tell us about. I would like to see it put in clinical trials. I would like to see it actually added to the questions that we see in clinical trials. Thank you so much, Cyrus, for joining us. I would like to see it um, in clinical trials. While you're asking us about the Tuskegee experiment, well, this was before Tuskegee. So why are you leaving this out? You're asking us about all these other trials. You need to say, reach out to Helen and say, how can we get your trial? What do we need to do to get your trial put into, your study put into our trial? Because we heard you on LinkedIn, or we heard you on Facebook, or somebody turned us on to, what's going on with what you're working on. And you're absolutely correct. Sandra was absolutely correct. This needs to be added to the clinical trial curriculum. There's no reason why it's not added. So, without further ado, I'm going to get off my high horse. I know Helen's story because I was fortunate enough to hear Helen briefly on gospel radio station where she was doing an interview, and then I heard her again I heard the whole story again on a YouTube channel that I was on. So I've heard both, in both. So I know her story, which is why I have a passion behind it, and which is why I said I have to have her on my show, because more people need to know. Look at what they're doing. They're telling us what they want us to know, but there's so much more that we need to be told that we're not told, and we won't be told because the yellow school bus is not coming down our street. It's not. And if it comes down our street, it's parking way down at the end of the block. So we can see it, so we can't complain and say, but the yellow school bus wasn't on our block because it was there. It will give you the address, it'll give you a street number of where it was. But as far as sitting in our community and hearing our stories and listening to our past and being able to communicate with, good evening, Dr. New, and being able to communicate with us in reference to what happened, why that distrust is there with our community, to really be able to know and understand it and move forward with it. This here will actually be an eye opener for you. It'll be an eye opener for everyone that listens to this story. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and tell you who Miss Helen Noel is with her awesome. And look, she's a woman on a mission. It takes, you know what? She's all about that history. She went back to the past. This is how bad she is. She went back to the past, got her past out, said, something going on here. I got to make sure this history stays history, but this history gets an acknowledgement. So she's leading the path and she's leading the charge to make sure that that's exactly what happens. So, who is Miss Helen Noel? She is a native of Elyria, Ohio. Helen enlisted in the United States Air Force and retired honorably in 2009 at the rank of Chief Master Sergeant, a woman on a mission. She is an accomplished author, dynamic international keynote speaker, and transformational consultant, known for her non-judgmental stance and radical coaching for others experiencing traumatic stress. Her first publication, 7 Days in the Fire, is a faith-based book recounting her personal traumatic experiences. It includes special patriarchs and matriarchs who took the time and encouraged Helen to talk story. Moreover, 7 Days in the Fire has been widely adopted as a therapeutic educational solution to motivate others on healing, restoration, and recovery of trauma. She has been diligently seeking a presidential apology and investigation for the Rosenwald Fund Study, the precursor to the Tuskegee Study, which involved thousands of blacks in heavy toxic materials. So, Helen, I'm going to now turn it over to you, and please go ahead and let us all, educate every one of us, right? C.H.L.M.S is all about patient education, empowerment, and engagement. And only through hearing stories that you're going to tell us, real, true stories that you're going to share with us tonight, can patients learn how to become empowered, educated, and engaged. So I am going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. First and foremost, thank you, Ms. Sandra, for this opportunity. I'm glad that you had an opportunity to listen to the segment where I was talking about the Rosenwald Fund Study, and I appreciate you reaching out to me. So let me just tell you how I began this research. It actually started from a promise. When I was growing up, we had an illness in the family. And we didn't know what the illness was, but the illness was taking the lives of family members. Allegedly, it was rooted in syphilis, but there was different rumors about it as well. And what goes on in the family pretty much stays in the family. So we were pretty much forbidden as children to talk about it, and we didn't talk about it. but my passion has always been in ancestry and genealogy. So when I retired from the military in 2009, I started doing some oral interviews, and at that time frame, one of my family members thought that maybe the illness in our family was maybe because our family may have been a part of the Tuskegee Study. I knew from my research in ancestry and genealogy that our family wasn't from Alabama. Therefore, I knew that we weren't uh, part of the Tuskegee Study. But it didn't stop me from further inquiring. And it led to me reaching out to the Tuskegee Center for Healthcare, Bioethics and Healthcare. And when I explained to the executive director one of my family members' suspicions about us being a part of the Tuskegee study, he then informed me that there was a study that happened before Tuskegee that a lot of people are not aware of. And it's called the Rosenwald Fund Study. And it involved 6 different states in the South and heavy toxic metals. So after he informed me of that, I asked him who was the keeper of the records. And I was informed that it was Fisk University. So I reached out to them and I began to do my own research. And what I discovered was, like I said, that there were 6 different states that was part of this atrocity. Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, and Virginia. The study started in Mississippi at the Mississippi Delta and Pineland Company, and then it was expanded to the other states. The state of Tennessee deviated from the study, and they conducted the study on family units. One of the counties in Mississippi that was part of the study conducted the study on pregnant women. So I began to seek the presidential apology and investigation after I discovered this information. Now, keep in mind, in October of 2010, President Obama apologized to the Guatemalans for the Guatemala syphilis inoculation study. And he initiated an investigation. The investigation determined that the study was ethically impossible. So right after that happened, I reached out to the commission that researched the Guatemala study. And they pretty much told me that they thought that a presidential apology and investigation was also warranted for the Rosenwald Fund Study. They asked me for a presidential summary, which I provided. In turn, they sent it to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. This was November-December timeframe of 2011. In turn, they sent the information to the Center for Disease Control. The Center for Disease Control denied the apology and investigation on 2 claims. First and foremost, they claimed that the study was not an experimental research study. And they also said that mercury, which was the primary metal that they were using on the patients, they said that it did not have a congenital effect. In turn, I provided them with information that the study was indeed an experiment. They still denied it. So I sent my information to my congressman, who in turn sent it directly to President Obama. That's what I asked him to do. Because prior to President Obama leaving office, he signed a historic landmark decision on Mercury and Air Toxic Standards Act. So I knew that President Obama was familiar with the adverse health effect of mercury. So prior to President Obama leaving office, he sent me a letter stating that the Center for Disease Control and Health and Human Services were prepared to readdress my issue concerning mercury and its congenital effect. I followed back up with the Trump administration. The director of the Agency of Toxic Substance and Disease Registry sent me a letter stating that mercury has a congenital effect. But then he denied that the Rosenwald Fund Study ever existed. So last year, I reached out to the president of the National Academy of Science. And when I explained my research to her, she told me, she said, Helen, the Center for Disease Control should have given you this apology and investigation a long time ago. So she gave me the information to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, the new director. She gave me her email address, and I sent my request for the apology and investigation to her. And it has been at the White House since February of last year. They acknowledge that they received my request, but I have yet to hear anything from them. So pretty much in a nutshell, that's my research. Now, do you have any questions for me, Sandra, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, my question for you is this: how did they come up with, in how did they come up with the participants who they did this study on? Like, was there I don't think there was informed consent, because I know it was prior to the informed consent laws being passed. But then how did they actually come up with who they were going to actually call, be participants in this study?
Well, keep in mind that during this time frame that the Rosenwald Fund Study occurred, this was on the heels of World War One. After the soldiers went to France and fought in World War One, a lot of them returned to their home countries with syphilis and gonorrhea, and it became an epidemic. So the League of Nations decided that they wanted to conduct an investigation to determine a standardized method, or to solidify a standardized method of treatment, because so many different countries were using different modes of attack. Prior to the League of Nations standardizing the treatment method, the United States decided that they were going to conduct their own study. So who did they conduct the study on? Blacks in the South, the vulnerable population. Now, during the same time frame that they were testing the Blacks in the South, they were also treating syphilitic white males. They received preferential treatment by the director of the venereal disease program in the public health service. They received federal housing, aid, and they were being treated directly by the director, like I said. White women were being discriminated against, because around that time frame, they were blaming a lot of the syphilis on the white women, while Blacks in the South were being treated with intensive and continuous heavy treatments. So it was clearly experimental, but it was a double standard of care. A lot of the reason why a lot of these reporters have yet to tell the story is because they're referring to it as a standard of care. It wasn't a standard, because the standard should be equitable across the board. It was a double standard in order for the African Americans to be treated with toxic heavy metals and heavier doses. And they sought participation from Black clergy and Black superintendent of schools, because they were the influential group in Black communities during that time.
So is it safe to say that, because I just heard something that you mentioned, and I'm not sure if I was correct in what I heard, when you stated that white women were supposed to be the carriers of the syphilis disease, correct?
Yes, they were blaming it on the white women because so many white males had syphilis.
So were there white participants in this study, or were these all Black participants in this study?
The majority of the people in the Rosenwald Fund Study were the Blacks in the South. They were also treating whites in Arkansas, primarily in Hot Springs, Arkansas. They considered that the mecca of syphilis, because a lot of whites were traveling from all across the country to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they were being treated by Dr. Winger, who at the time was in charge of the venereal disease program for the public health service. The white
Okay, so
women that were going to hot springs were being discriminated against, like I said, because they were trying to blame someone for the white males' disease and sicknesses. So a lot of them were blaming it on the white women during that time.
so it wasn't just so it wasn't a health disparity. Good evening, Jackie. So it wasn't just a health disparity on African Americans. It was a health disparity also, or a health equity issue. Not even a health equity, a health injustice issue also on the Caucasian women. Now,
Yes.
I bring that up to you because I want to say at the beginning of International Health History Month, Women's History Month, I had a speaker on. Unfortunately, we had a problem, technical issues that day. However, what she addressed was just what you just said. So if during this International History, Women's History Month, it's important for us as women, it's important for us as men to understand what the history of women has incorporated, what is encompassed for us as women, period, across the board. This racism, this racial stereotyping, this I don't even want to say racial stereotyping because it was actually a racial stereotyping as well as a gender stereotyping that has been going on. So it's like mind boggling to me that we're still years away from where we need to be at in this country because that same racial and that same gender biasm that happened back then, fast forward to today, it's still happening, right? Nobody's speaking up unless you speak up and somebody hears your story and they're like, oh, well, the same thing happened to me. We gotta stop waiting for everybody else to start speaking up, ladies. We have to. We're not gonna go anywhere if we keep silently sitting on the sidelines and not opening up our voices and not using that all important tool that we all own, which is our voice, and speaking up to what's going on. I'm like, look, this was the 30s, the 40s. Yeah, mind boggling to me. I'm sorry. It was just mind boggling because I picked up on that and I was like, okay, well, that was racial and it was sexual biasm, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was definitely, and it's amazing that you said that because several days ago I attended a local NAACP meeting here where I live. And when I shared the information about the Rosenwald Fund Study, one of the young ladies afterwards, she approached me and she said, Helen, I'm so glad that you are fighting for justice in this endeavor because my family was also part of an experiment. And she said what happened was, if I'm not mistaken, it was the pharmaceutical companies that went out and they were actually choosing vulnerable populations of women. And while they were pregnant, they were giving them a drug. And she called the drug DES. And she said, as a result of them giving these women these drugs, ultimately it affected the next generation. And she admitted to me that she, at the age of 18, she had cervical cancer. And it was as a result of that drug that they had given to her mother. And she said a lot of the women in her family have had the same issues in trying to give birth because of this. And so it's so many different secrets. And I said, well, what I haven't heard anything about this. And she said, because the statute of limitations has ran out, they're not pressing the issue the way that they should. She said, but it's definitely something that involved a lot of women in vulnerable populations. So like you said, it's time out for not speaking up about these type of things. If it happened, it happened, and no fault of the individuals, but we need to start sharing our family's medical health so that the future generations will know. We learn from what we know, and our people are perishing for lack of knowledge.
Exactly. And you know what? Not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to toot my own horn. That's exactly why when I wrote the personal health plan and journal that I wrote 2 years ago, that's exactly why I was adamant that I included a place for family health history. I don't care where you are in this world. You need to know what your family health history is. It will come back and bite you, bite your children, bite your children's children. There's a reason why when we go to the doctor's office and the doctor gives us, well, especially if we're a new patient, and the doctor gives us that 50-page form that they need us to fill out, there's a reason for it. Because all of this is tied back to our genetics. It's tied back to even before we were a twinkle in our mom and dad's eye. Our family history is important, and too many people don't own up to their family history. I give it to you. A lot of people don't know where their family history starts. But as I tell people all the time, if you were adopted, you have a cultural history that you can go and you can look up and see what runs in your culture, because a lot of times your cultural history will tell you a story, will paint a vivid a very vivid picture for you and what it is that could possibly be going on with you. You know, just recently my mom passed away in December 2023. I didn't know. I was diagnosed 2 years ago with CKD, which is chronic kidney disease. When I told my mother, she was like, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. You'll be okay." She wasn't overly concerned. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe that's my mom. She said, don't be concerned. I'm not going to be concerned. I didn't find out that my mother herself had chronic kidney disease until about 2 months before she passed away. And that's when I found out that she did. I didn't put the pieces together that it was a genetic, that genetically this was what was going on until I went to my nephrologist's office, and they were actually they were looking for clinical participants to participate that had a family history of chronic kidney disease, right? That's what they were looking for. They were looking for people that were on medication. I myself didn't qualify because I'm a holistic healer. So my medications come for, especially for my kidneys, comes from me taking the herbal supplements that my nutritional functional doctor has me taking. So, but they were looking for people that were on medication that had a family history of CKD. And I told my nephrologist, like, wow, really? He was
Right.
like, yes, we're studying this. So I don't care where you are, right, in this world. If you don't know your family history, now's the time for you to start writing it down and making it clear so that your family is aware of of your family history. While kids go to the doctor, we don't want them to be like, well, I don't know what they had, right? We
Right.
want them to be able to say, this is what my mom had, this is what my dad had, or this is what's in my culture. So can you check me for this when signs and symptoms start coming up? And it's important that we do that. And it's important because if you don't know this, let me tell you this now. Day after day for about the past 4 or 5 months that I can remember, for about the past 4 or 5 months, every day I am getting a story, or I'm getting a news headline, or something is coming across my desk that's actually telling me about how our young people are losing their lives with these diseases, and there's these conditions that we were told were eradicated years ago.
Right.
And so now they're prevalent, and now they're coming up in these in the history of these children. And so we're losing our children. And guess what? A lot of these deaths could somehow be subsided or dealt with proactively if they knew that mom and dad had this. It shouldn't be a secret. Let your children know what you're dealing with. It should not be a secret because this is their lives, right? Jackie is saying genetic history is so important. but it can be hard to understand. We don't know anything from my dad's father's side. Jackie, you are certainly correct. And once again, if you know, right? If you know, Jackie, if you know, like, okay, well, what was his culture? Let's start there. What was his culture? Let's start looking at past. Okay, well, we don't really have their information. It's kind of hard to get. Start by looking at the culture and making a note of that, putting that down, and having the doctors look at that, having a clinical trial or wherever you're doing, having them look at that and see if that maybe can lead. It might not lead up to it. I'm not saying it's a promise that 100% is going to lead up to, but what it will do, what it will most definitely do, right, is give you a starting point. We can't keep continue to sit back and wait for that starting point to happen when it's right there in front of us. Sometimes we got to think outside the box and get information that will help us, especially because this information that can help us is going to help our future generations. This information that can help us, it doesn't need to be, it needs to come out. It just really does. I mean, really quick, Bob Marley in his story, right? He had cancer, and his doctor asked him. His doctor said, "Well, what is your family history?" He said, "I don't know. My dad was white." That's all he knew. Because the doctor was trying to see, okay, well, maybe this is something that comes from your family. So that's how important family history is. Delora is on, and she's saying, "Thanks for sharing. This is vital information for the continuance of life, especially for those who are uninformed. Life is precious." Delora, and I'm hoping I'm saying your name correctly. It most certainly is. Life is precious. And in addition to life being precious, we only get one. We only
Absolutely.
get one. I know I used to say this all the time. We get one, right? And I don't know, Helen, maybe you can speak to it, or maybe you have a different way of looking at it. But AI is doing everything. I want AI to bring me back. When God says, "Sandra, this is your day," and they put me in the ground or I get cremated or whatever, I'm not trying to come back.
No, but I want to chime in and add something to Jackie's comment.
Uh-huh.
And I know she may have said that she doesn't know, her father's genetics or anything like that. But a lot of times too, when it comes to medical history, ancestry is a good place to start as well, especially when you can identify the different regions and you can research some of the issues that may have occurred in those cities, during that time frame. Like for instance, and you mentioned the chronic kidney disease that you have as well, Sandra. My brother was part of the Camp Lejeune water contamination, and I donated a kidney to him in 2013. So we all know that just from him being in that area at Camp Lejeune, that they were pouring those chemicals, in the water. Well, the waters were being polluted, so to speak. So if you trace your family's history and you begin to inquire more about ancestry, you will start realizing that you can get access to vital records and causes of death on death certificates. So that's a place to start as well, because you can look at some of that information and it may link you back to some of the issues and symptoms that they may have had in your family line just based off of causes of death. So that's a place to start as well.
Thank you so much for that, Helen. I certainly appreciate that, and you are correct. Once again, we gotta start. Like history has shown us, there's nobody come to save us, especially women. Like Helen just said, we were being blamed for stuff that probably wasn't even our fault, but they had to put it on someone, just like Helen just said. So they put it on us. So are they coming to help us? Probably not. I mean, you read stories all the time. Young lady just lost her life to cervical cancer. She went to the doctor and told them her signs and symptoms. They told her it wasn't nothing. She's dead, 35 years old. So, these are stories that we've got to start taking notice of. And Helen, next on to the next question. Um, can you is there anyone from the road? Well, you know what, you just basically answered it somewhat. So are the descendants from the Rosenwald Fund Study, are they still alive?
Well, here's the issue with that. There's a whole lot of descendants still alive simply because this study involved over thousands of blacks in the South. Initially, when they tested the individuals, they tested all ages, all sexes, family units in Tennessee, pregnant women in Mississippi. So when you think about it from that standpoint, and the fact that the study started in 1929, do the math. My cousin who passed away was a third generation, and she passed away in 2008 before her 40th birthday. So when you think about heavy toxic metals and the fact that they have a congenital effect and adverse health effects in future generations, when you think about a lot of these pre-existing conditions in African Americans, and the fact that during the same time frame that the Rosenwald Fund Study existed, this was also during the same time frame that during the Great Migration. So imagine conducting this study in 1929 and the sheer amount of people who were migrating to different regions of the country with potentially heavy toxic metal poisoning and giving birth and moving on. So when you think about the sheer number of people who may have been affected by this and their descendants, it's massive.
Well, I mean, it's sad, and you know what? It saddens me to no extent, to wildest extent. It just it just saddens me that this was allowed to happen, and for such a long time, it was swept under the rug. Um, and I tell people this all the time. We're told what they want us to know. When I say they, politics, the news media, whoever, we're told what they want us to know. If we want to know more than that, we have to go digging. And a lot of people, well, I don't want to dig and I don't want to find out, but you need to. I mean, it's a priority that you dig a little bit, that you find out things like this, and you like, okay, well, let me see, because me and Helen were talking before we started, and I was like, okay, so now I find out about the Rosenwald Fund. How many other studies were done? Because there wasn't any such, informed consent wasn't a thing then. Nobody had to have informed consent. They could just go pick you off the street corner and say, okay, well, we're gonna make an example out of you, or we're gonna use you because you look like you ain't doing nothing, right? So we're just gonna use you and do what we want to do to you, and nobody will ever find out about it because we'll just keep it hush hush. Or it depends on the political atmosphere that's going on when you bring it up. Who's in office? Will they push it or won't they push it? Will they stand on your corner and say, yes, you have a right to this story, we need to talk about this? Or will they just silently wish you away, right? Which is why it's important that when you have the light on you, the limelight on you, you really need to take advantage of that limelight. You really need to do what you can to get it out there. Because once that limelight falls off, chances are we will never hear about it. So I do have another question for you. And we did talk briefly about the ethical concerns related to the medical practice. There technically really wasn't any, right?
No.
Oh, yeah. So they're technically, I mean, our lives were just like our lives weren't our lives. Now, is there have there been any ongoing efforts to provide support or research for the communities that were affected by this?
No, and like I said, my whole attempt to get the presidential apology and investigation, it's been going on since 2011. And in 2015, I reached out to the United Nations, first in DC, who referred me to the United Nations in New York, the headquarters. And they in turn sent my information or gave me the information for the United Nations Environmental Program in Kenya, in Africa. And when I reached out to them, they assigned a special repertoire on human rights and the environment to investigate my story. And from their investigation, they determined that the Rosenwald Fund Study was a violation of civil and human rights. And they sent the information to the US, but of course, they were using an outdated document. Back then, they were experimenting and writing publications, but the publications that they were writing was based off of skewed information. Because think about it, Alabama was initially part of the Rosenwald Fund Study. And when the study allegedly ended in 1932, that's when the Tuskegee study started. So Tuskegee, Macon County, Alabama, was initially part of the Rosenwald Fund Study. But from my research, I've also found out that they also continued the study in Tennessee because of its unique family unit nature. So my question is to the CDC, and in my request for the apology and investigation, how can you justify giving the apology and investigation for the study that was salvaged and became the Tuskegee study, but you have yet to give the apology and investigation for the continuance of the family unit study? It doesn't make good sense. But a lot of these counties and a lot that were involved, they don't even know that they were involved. So I'm going to be hosting a gala next month in Newport News from the 26th of April to the 28th of April, a Flower Girls Gala, and I launched a movement back in October, the Family Love Matters Movement for Justice, to bring awareness to this atrocity. Alfred Carter, Henrietta Lack's grandson, is going to be my guest speaker at this gala. Jeff Majors, the world-renowned harpist and jazz musician, is also going to perform at the gala. And it's going to be a full-blown program to bring awareness to this because it's important, like I said, for people to know. And because they're denying the apology and investigation, I need to get the word out. I'm using another angle to do it, and I'm doing it through my Flower Girls Gala.
And I do have a question in reference to the Flower Girls. Can you just give us a brief history? Well, why are they named the Flower Girls, and what relationship do they have? What relationship do they have to the Rosenwald Fund Study?
Okay, so when my cousin Beverly passed away in 2008, when we were kids, I made a promise to her to always love and take care of her no matter what. When she passed away, my research is a labor of love for a promise that I made to my cousin Beverly. And cousin Beverly passed away before her 40th birthday. So several years ago, on the anniversary of her death, the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, Flower Girls Gala. So several years ago, I reached out to 365 women on Facebook and asked for them to volunteer for a divinely inspired assignment. And they began to volunteer. The reason why it's Flower Girls Gala is because the family members that passed away prematurely, they passed away before they received their flowers, so to speak. So it's a way to honor them. And the gala on that Saturday, the day of the banquet, that's my cousin Beverly's 55th heavenly birthday. So we're going to pay tribute to her at the gala. And that's how the Flower Girls Gala came about. And for anyone who is interested in attending, it's going to be in Newport News, Virginia, at the Newport News Marriott. And they can go to my website, www.helennoel.com. That's www.HELENNOEL.com. And look up the information for the Flower Girls Gala. I'm also accepting donations for the movement. I'm asking for sponsorship. There's a presidential apology and investigation, a request for the a petition out there as well under my Flower Girls Gala that people can go and sign the petition. And please just help spread the word, because it's something that needs to be, it's a story that needs to be shared and told. Can't hear you.
Helen, what is your website address again, so that I can actually put it on the bottom of the screen so it can scroll across the screen, so that those that are interested can actually outreach, and whether it's actually to attend the April event, or whether it's to donate, or whether it's like, Helen, what, we can't come, we're not going to be able to make it, but we want to be able to volunteer. So how can we do it? What is your email address, so that I can put it on the bottom of the screen so that people can pick that information up?
My website is www.helennoel.com. First and last name.com.
So for those of you that are watching this evening, or wanting to know, I did just put this across. You should be seeing it now across the screen. Once again, if you don't write it down and you're listening and you're like, Sandra, I really want to help, how can I help? Please outreach me. I will make sure that you actually are put in touch with Helen. I will send you directly to Helen. I'll give you her email address. This is all about helping to right a very, very wrong situation. Something that happened that shouldn't have happened, that we need to get acknowledgement for. And Helen, what I do want to ask you is that once you receive, and I'm going to claim it for you, right? Once you receive that acknowledgement, how will that acknowledgement benefit the communities that were impacted then and are still impacted? Because as you just said, it's a generational curse, right? So it's going to live on for years and years and years. It's never going to go away. That curse is a permanent curse on those communities. So what benefits will they receive from you receiving that acknowledgement?
First and foremost, my goal is in not only just having the gala here locally, because Virginia was part of the study, but eventually I want to take this information to the different counties that were a part of this atrocity. Initially, the Public Health Service, they're claiming that it was conducted in one county in each of the states. That's not true. According to my research, it was conducted in 5 counties in the state of Mississippi alone. And then when the Tennessee Family Unit study continued, it continued in a group of Western Tennessee counties. So I want to be able to establish community collaboratives in these counties that were a part of the study, and to address their needs, to find out what it is that they actually need. When the Public Health Service sought participation in this study from Julius Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald was a good friend of Booker T. Washington. And after Booker T. Washington passed away, Rosenwald stood up the Rosenwald Fund for the betterment of mankind. And he focused on 3 areas: Black education, Black healthcare, and making healthcare available for average Americans. He wasn't aware of the pervasive nature of the study when he said that he would volunteer and help jointly fund the project. I don't want to tarnish Rosenwald's name or the good partnership that he established with Booker T. Washington. What I do want to do is to refocus on those same areas that he was focusing on, and turn something that was bad into something good. After the Tuskegee Study received the presidential apology from President Clinton, they stood up a museum at Tuskegee University. And every year they commemorate the descendants and the victims of the study. Think about the historically Black colleges and universities that may benefit from having a museum built in those states that were part of the study so that they could further educate people on the medical history of African Americans after this apology and investigation comes forward. It's a lot of good that we can do from this once we get the word out. And that's my overall intention, is to be able to turn something bad into something good.
And for that, you are definitely commended on doing the work that needs to be done. So many times we sit and we hear talk and discussion after discussion, and how is, what damage is done, and oh, this is horrible treatment, and oh, this, it is really, really bad. But we don't move past a discussion. Talk is cheap. Show us what you mean. If you really care about us and you sincerely care about us, show us what you mean. We're at a point in time in history where DEI is going away, right? There's no more diversity, equity, inclusion. They're really dismantling that. It's hurting more. As we go back to the beginning of what you said, white women as well as blacks were subjected to these funds, subjected to this study, right? So when you remove things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're hurting more than just the African American race. You're hurting women, you're hurting children, you're dismantling communities. Why? Because politically it's not correct. Come on now, where are we gonna get the when are we gonna allow human empathy to take us forward to where we need to go, to a sustainable future? It's not gonna happen if we just silently sit back and let these things happen. If we don't go digging to see, if we don't start including these lesser known, and one of the things that my foundation does is, and I have a heart for this, is I know that there's larger, and I'm going to equate this to the Tuskegee and the Rosenwald. I know that there are larger known health conditions, right? They receive all the attention, or most of the attention is on those larger known health conditions. But what happens to the lesser known diseases that are impacting our community that many of us don't know a thing about, because nobody's talking and nobody's saying anything and nobody's doing anything? When are they going to get the help that they need? Right? Same thing with the Tuskegee and the Rosenwald. Yes, we did. We needed to know about Tuskegee, but we also need to know about all the other ones that happened prior to Tuskegee, so that we can start helping those that were impacted by these types of studies, by these uncalled for, unwarranted studies where, you know, women. I mean, without women, we wouldn't have a society. Men, for the most part, can't have babies. We bring all the babies into the world. So if our bodies are being used for these studies and are not being actually taken into account the harm that can come to a woman, then what are we saying about everybody else in this country, in this world, right? We got to start speaking up, and we got to start moving past the thing of sitting at the table talking. People say that, Sandra, we could just really see it in your body when we're talking, right? And you just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again, right? And I'm like, because I get bored, and I don't want to be, I don't want to be rude or egotistical, but I'm tired of talk. Talk is not. Look where talk has gotten us, especially women. Not very far at all when you look at our history of what we went through. So we'll just have another couple of questions for you, and that's this, and I've led to this already. Is, as a society, how can we help what you're doing? For those of us that may want to come in, and give me 1 second. I do see a comment here from D. Laura, and I'm not sure. She's saying PCOS, insulin resistance, and more, but I'm not sure, D. Laura, if I'm missing a part of your comment. Or Helen, did you know what she was talking about?
No, I'm not sure what she's talking about.
Yeah, I'm thinking she's trying to mention something. So we're going to give her just a moment or two for her to actually be able to go ahead and put in the rest of her comment because I don't want to miss it. Um, I don't want to miss it. So while we are waiting for Delora to actually type out what her question was or what her statement was, what I do want to know is, as a society, what can we do to join the movement? How can we help?
Primarily, like I said, it's to go out there and to my website and sign the petition. Um, like I said, I'm accepting donations, sponsorship. Prayer always helps, and spreading the word. And sending the information to other people just to make them aware of it as well. Um, if you're from one of the states that was a part of the study, maybe reach out to your congressman, ask them if they're involved. Right now, I'm waiting to hear back from Congressman Thompson because there were so many counties in Mississippi that was involved. Um, and I'm still aggressively pursuing the apology and investigation, just trying to bring awareness to that as well. And if you know someone that's at the White House that has a connection, I mean, there's strength in numbers. Join the movement, like I said, whatever you feel led to do.
I thank you so much for that information that you're giving us in reference to how we can help, because we do definitely want to be able to help in any way. I know the Chalmers Foundation, I know that I will be signing whatever it is that's needed to, put my name in there so that, if you need help, with whatever, getting the word out, educating patients on what's going on, that we could be there at the forefront for you, standing there as we stand in the gap so often, not just our foundation, but foundations throughout the country, standing in a gap for those who are, who need and for some reason can't, or for some reason won't stand and won't say anything. It takes more than a little bit, once, like you just said, Helen, to get things like this across. There's definitely power in numbers. We're not going to have the power that we need to have behind anything if all we ever look at is how we do in competition. I am not your competitor. I've never said that I was a competitor, but I tell you one thing, and I move away. I move far, far away from people who want me to become a competitor, because that's not me. That's not my foundation. That's not me. That's not the basis and the mission that we have in front of us. It's called collaboration. You want to do something, let's collaborate. Because if we don't collaborate and each of us are going our own separate ways, guess what? It's not going to happen. It's not going
Absolutely.
to ever happen. The movement is not going to actually happen. We're at a standstill, and we have to move past that standstill. I also want to ask you, in reference to your vendor or sponsorship opportunities for the event, are there still vendor and sponsorship opportunities available?
Yes, there definitely is. And if anyone is interested in becoming a sponsor, there's information on my website as well for sponsorship. Um, and there's a vendor form under the Flower Girls Gala. And anyone can email me at helennole@bellsouth.net if you're interested in corporate sponsorship. But there's also a donate button on the website, and they can donate directly on the website as well.
Okay. And is there any, for those that cannot afford to, is costly or don't have the funds to actually join in the gala, is there also a way that we can go to the website and give a donation?
Yes, it's a donate now button on the website.
Okay. So once again, everyone, there's no amount too little or too big that will be useful for Helen as she continues her fight and she continues to make history by uncovering a secret that, and I call it a secret because if it wasn't a secret, we would have known about this. At the same time, they told us about Tuskegee, and yet they question why it is that our community does not trust the medical system. Well, she just brought it to you live. She didn't hide nothing. She didn't skip nothing. She didn't, she didn't do anything. She brought it to you live. This is why our community is the way it is. This is why, we do what we do as, African Americans. This is also why women feel as though their voices are not heard, because literally they're not. I mean, I'm putting it out there for us. Literally, our voices are not heard, and they won't ever be heard if we don't find a way to actually come together and collaborate on policy decisions and get out to the polls and go and vote and do all the things that we need to do to make a choice, to make a decision, right? It's not going to happen. So I before we do close, because I see D. Laura did not put her comment in. If you have comments once again that you would like Helen to address, please put them in. If you're on LinkedIn, if you look at the top right hand corner, you'll see the three elliptical buttons. Please go in there to details or to comments. Put your comments in there. Let Helen know. Send her a bunch of support. Send her. Let's flood her with prayers. Let's flood her with love. Let's flood her with the support that she needs to keep on the path that she's on. She's not on this path for her. She's on this path for all of us. She could have stopped this a very long time ago when they told her, okay, well, we ain't gonna do nothing with it. She could have stopped it. That's not what she did. She kept going. So let's flood her with love. Let's flood her with as much hugs and prayers and everything else positive. Please don't send her no negative stuff. Please. Please. If you got something, you listen to this tonight, you got something negative to say, please keep it to yourself because she don't need that right now. I don't
Right.
need it, and she definitely doesn't need it. And you can send it if you want, but I'm asking you, please. I'm literally begging you, please don't send her anything negative. Please use that negativity down the street somewhere around the corner, down wherever, in a different state, different country. Just don't use it with her because she doesn't need it. She needs an uplifting. She needs a voice. She needs us to raise behind her and let her know that she's not standing in this as she makes history and making sure that we know about this, that she's not standing in this alone.
Amen.
Helen, I thank you. I thank you, thank you, thank you. I did not ask you though, what is the individual purchase price for the tickets?
For Flower Girls, it's 280. If they get a table of 8 or 10, it's 290 per person. 300 general admission for just, if you're not a Flower Girl. And if you want to attend the banquet only, it's 160. And all of the ticket prices are also on our website under the Flower Girls.
Okay. So for those of you that are interested in going and being there, please go ahead and send a donation of any kind if you're in the Virginia area and you have the time where you can actually become a part of the event and or you traveling and you got some free mileage and you're looking for somewhere to go. That's Please help her. Please attend. Please continue to follow her. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and close out this video for this evening. Once again, please remember, I know you're probably like, why does Sandra keep saying, please remember? And that's because it's important for you all to know. Should you need a copy of this video, please ask me. Please send me a message, whether it's through my website, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on LinkedIn. Please send me a message and say, Sandra, I want to have the Rosenwald Fund Study. I want to have that so that I can make sure you get it. Please share it because you know what? What Helen just said is real. What she needs is more voices. She needs to have more attention put on the Rosenwald study. The only way that we can do that is if we share, share, share. right? We don't share it and we keep it to ourselves. I mean, I just don't know. Thank you, Jackie. Great discussion. Thank you, ladies. With passion and with love. This is why I do what I do. Helen, 3 tips that you want us to know or that you want us to take away from with this evening's event.
The 3 tips would be: know your family history, know your past, because when you don't know your history and your past, it's hard to know where you're going. And when you make a promise, keep it.
Thank you so much. And please have the rest of an enjoyable evening.
And thank you so much, Miss Sandra, for this opportunity.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone, and good day or good afternoon. But everyone, please take what she said to heart. Thank you.
Thank you.